We're going to be doing something fun today, everybody. So, in a couple of days, Arc System Works is going to have a big stream where they're going to be announcing new projects and, like, giving updates on current ones, and I'm going to be coping that we're going to be getting new BlazBlue news, which may or may not happen. I may be streaming my reaction to this event just for that, just to get my reaction for anything BlazBlue. But what is much more likely to happen is that they're going to give us some new characters and updates for Marvel Tōkon fighters. And this got me real excited, and I've been wanting to make a video like this for a while, and given we're probably going to get our first character reveal here in a couple of days, this really gave me the motivation to make a video like this. Back in the day, I made a BB tag video like this, about 2 or 3 trailers in, where I ranked every character's chance of getting into the game and how much I wanted every character in the game, and I thought it'd be fun to do that again. Now, first of all, I'm not very knowledgeable about Marvel. Basically what I did is I took a Marvel Rivals tier list and then added characters from the Marvel vs. Capcom series and the MCU onto it to have like a wide array of Marvel characters. Basically all the ones that I know, at least to some extent. I'm no expert when it comes to the Marvel universe. I don't read the comics, so please don't roast me, this is just for fun. I also don't have a strong passion for Marvel characters like I did for BlazBlue ones, so I won't be rating these characters on how much I want them in the game. I'm just going to be rating them based on how likely I think they are to get into the game. And we have a few criteria for this. In the first interview for Marvel Tōkon Fighters, the dev stated that the roster revolved around 3 factors. The first is that they really wanted iconic Marvel characters in the game. Characters like Captain America, Spider-Man, Iron Man, really iconic characters. The second thing is that they wanted a variety of play styles. They wanted characters that would function very differently from one another. Probably characters that you would use a bunch of different weapons and have very distinct play styles. And the third and final criteria they said they had is that they wanted to represent characters who have not yet been in a fighting game. Characters such as Star-Lord, who I do not believe were ever in the Marvel vs. Capcom games. So that's the criteria we have. I have gathered 60 characters left to rank on this list, and I'm not going to get a lot real in-depth with these like I did with the BlazBlue ones on the BB tag list because I don't know Marvel lore to a crazy extent. I'm just going to talk about them a little briefly, maybe talk about what their play styles will be like, and talk about how if someone like me, who's more of a casual fan, who's only really seen the movies and played some of the more mainline games, thinks that a character like any one of these is iconic enough to get into the game based on those criteria. And I want to start with Hulk, because I feel like Hulk is probably the most practically guaranteed character on this list. Hulk is super iconic, and before I started watching Marvel movies way back in the early 20-teens, I actually thought Hulk was the most iconic Marvel character in existence. There's a lot of things you could do with Hulk's kit. You could make him a grappler, you could make him a heavy hitter, you could do all sorts of things with Hulk. And I think that even though he's obviously been in like all the Marvel fighting games, that's for good reason. He's the Incredible Hulk. Everyone knows Hulk. Hulk is gonna be in the game practically guaranteed. It's for this reason that I think that probably being in a previous Marvel fighting game is probably the least important of those 3 criteria. I think that they are more so focused on creating unique play styles, getting those iconic characters in, the OG Avengers characters, the Amazing Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk. I think that's more so where their priorities lie. I also want to state that I think that if a character isn't nearly as iconic, they have a much better chance of getting into the game if they have only been in Marvel Rivals, as opposed to only having been in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom, because if that's the case, then they have already been represented in a fighting game. So let's pick someone else next. Let's pick Black Panther. Black Panther has also just not been in a Marvel fighting game yet, and this character has become more and more iconic as the years have gone on. I didn't know who this character was before the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I guess that's the case for a lot of them, right? But I feel like this character is a lot more iconic now. Everyone knows who Black Panther is. He fights with claws, and I think the only other couple of characters on this list who really fight with claws are Wolverine and Wolverine's daughter, X-23. So I think there's some pretty decent potential for a rather unique kit here. Gonna put him in very likely. I think Black Panther has a very likely chance of getting into this game, as does Hawkeye. I think that all the Avengers from the original, like, 6 Avengers from the first Avengers movie are all gonna have really decent chances of getting into the game. I don't think he's practically guaranteed, but I think he would make a good zoner. Like I said, I'm not, like, familiar about how the kits worked in Marvel vs. Capcom, like, at all. So I don't know, like, how a character like Hawkeye functioned in that game. I don't know how a character like Hulk functioned in that game. But I think Hawkeye would make a great projectile-focused zoner. Arc System Works does a lot of characters like this. Characters like Yukiko, characters like Batista. I'm going to be talking a lot about BB Tag and maybe some about Strive as well, because those are the main reference points for games like this, you know? These are the main reference points for, like, Arc System Works' biggest games and, like, the kits that they're going to develop. So I'm going to be talking about BB Tag and Strive a lot. And I think that a character like Batista, or even like New 13, with like how she like throws her swords out, maybe Hawkeye could do something similar full screen, where he could like shoot arrows and have them ricochet off in certain directions. I think that would be real cool. I'm gonna try to order these tiers a little. I'm gonna put Hawkeye above Black Panther. I think Hawkeye has a real solid chance of getting into the game. The Punisher has a very interesting potential mix of zoning and rushdown. We know he uses weapons like knives, and he also is packing a lot of guns. Guns can function in very unique ways in Arc System Works games, like how Noel's guns function, for example, is very different from how, like, Unika's and Elfelt's guns function in Strive, you know? I'm picking a lot more of the very likely characters a lot earlier on. I'm saving some of these other ones to talk about a little later. I'm trying to pick characters that I feel like have a much higher chance of getting into the game more so here at the beginning. I don't think the Punisher has been a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe yet, but even before that, I know who the Punisher was. I used to play this miniature figure game called Tactics that was like a combination of Marvel, Star Wars, and Transformers. And the Punisher always looked so iconic in that game. I would really like to see like his comics outfit, the one with the huge skull on it. I think that'd be real cool. I think he's an iconic character, and I think that while guns are much more prevalently used in the Marvel Universe, you'd be surprised how few characters on this list actually use guns. And the characters that do use guns are all very different. Like Black Widow, for example, like her playstyle would be completely different from Punisher's, and I don't think that them both being in the game could detract from the difference in playstyle that they want the characters to have all that much. Like I said, all the members of the OG Avengers, I think, are very likely to get in the game, and Black Widow has the added boon of not having been in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom. Not Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom, in Marvel vs. Capcom in general to this day to my knowledge. If any of these characters are in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, I've never played that game, so I wouldn't know about it. Black Widow has the potential to also be a zoner, but she could also be like a brawler. We see her doing a lot of both in the universe, and she could have like sort of a mixed kit that allows her to adapt to whatever situation she's in, quite unlike how she is in Marvel Rivals. I'm actually going to put her at the top of very likely. I think this character is very likely to get into the game on account of the fact that she's not been represented yet despite being such an iconic character. And I think that given that she's a universal specialist of a bunch of different weapons, they could do a lot of unique things with her and her kit. You know, looking at this list, I think that Hulk might be the only character I feel is practically guaranteed. I might have to bump some of these Avenger characters up there just to flesh out this tier a little bit more. Let's rank someone a bit lower on the list. Rocket Raccoon is a character who I think isn't going to be making an appearance. Just for reference, BB Tag had about 20 characters in its roster when it first came out. Although like 4 DLC characters did drop day 1, so it was more like 24 on release, right? And Guilty Gear Strive had about 15 in its base roster, I believe. So that's about how big I'm expecting the games to be. I think I'm leaning more so towards BB Tag's initial roster size than Strive, because BB Tag was the game that started off as a team-based game. Strive didn't become a team-based game until much later when they were basically beta testing for this game. So I think I'm leaning towards the base roster of the game being about 20 characters. we're probably gonna bump these two up to practically guaranteed. I think that like the OG Avengers are practically guaranteed once they reach that initial point of 20 characters. That's what I'm basing these assumptions on, is on the assumption that the roster is going to be about 20 characters. And there's no doubt that it's going to be much bigger than that with DLC down the line. So I guess this list is mostly about predicting what the base roster is going to look like. BB Tag revealed 5 characters in its initial trailer, which was 1/4 of what ended up being the base roster. So with this game being 4v4, it's a chance that this game's base roster ends up being a little higher. It might be even closer to 30. We'll just have to see. But still, I think that Rocket Raccoon is not very likely to get into the game. Small characters in fighting games have never really worked well. I don't know how he functioned in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, but just looking at him, it reminds me of Yoda in Soul Calibur 4, who just couldn't get grabbed at all because of his height and just low-profile throws. But despite that, he's already been represented in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I think that this one goes as far as it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. They already have Star-Lord here as the Guardians of the Galaxy representative. Rocket was more so that back in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Hella, judging villain representation is always very difficult because most of the iconic Marvel characters are heroes. Like Doctor Doom and Thanos are probably, and Ultron, I guess, basically the big name Avengers villains are the characters that are the villains that are usually the face of Marvel. So ranking like other Marvel villains, it's difficult because BB Tag had a big villains problem too. We didn't get like a whole bunch of villains in the game until the very last patch the game ever got. And I would say that Hela is not even in the top 3 most iconic Marvel villains. I don't know how many spots they're going to be reserving for villains, but we already have Doom. And I think that both Ultron and Thanos, the big Avengers villains, are more likely to get into the game than her. I still think she's a cool character. I'm going to give her a solid, decent chance. I think she more so fits around towards the middle of the list. She hasn't been in a game yet, so that's good potential representation. And she's been in both Marvel Rivals and the MCU. I don't really know what her kit would be like in a fighting game. I feel like every other character ranked so far has a much more defined kit as to what it would look like, but on the other hand, that could also lead to them being a lot more creative with it. We'll just have to see if she makes it into the game. I guess since I talked about them, let's go ahead and throw up Ultron and Thanos. See, the thing about Ultron is that I almost feel like in a fighting game, his playstyle would be too similar to Iron Man's, where he'd sort of be like flying like that, almost like how Storm does. I guess Ultron wouldn't like walk like Iron Man. He might be an Iron Man that's even more aerial focused. Maybe I'm just basing that too much on how he works in Marvel Rivals. Ultron had a very big representation in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite as 1/2 of what made up that game's main villain. So they may think the quota for a character like this is already filled, but everyone knows Ultron. Ultron hype is up right now because of Marvel Rivals. I'm going to put him at the tail end of very likely. I think these two characters are more likely. Hela might even be above him, you know? Like maybe I even may want to do this, right? Because like the only thing Ultron really has on Hela is that he's slightly more iconic. Ultron was in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and I feel like his kit wouldn't be as unique. You know what? Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll actually switch them for those reasons. Thanos, on the other hand, has become so iconic that I feel like he has to make it into the game. They have to put Thanos in the game. He was in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, not in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, but everyone knows Thanos, everyone loves Thanos. This has become the Marvel villain, even more than Galactus, who I didn't even put on this list for obvious reasons. Come on, put Thanos in the game. It would be so sick. If you can have Doctor Doom fighting together with him, you can have Thanos fighting together with him. Thanos teamed up with him in the story of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite as well. Everyone loves this character. Put him in the game. Put him in the game. In Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, the Infinity Stones were a big part of the game's core mechanics, and I feel like tying them to a single character like this gives Thanos the potential for a very unique, diverse kit. If his character just had the Infinity Stones and they made up the bulk of what he could do with his kit, that would just be sick. Put Thanos in the game, please. Maybe I just want him in the game more than he is practically guaranteed. I don't care. I'm putting him up there. I'm a big Thanos lover. Just like every other Marvel normie in existence. Luna Snow is unlikely. I don't know where this character came from. No one knew who this character was before Marvel Rivals. I think the person who created her even had a hand in, like, a lot of Marvel Rivals development, and that's why she was able to get into the game. I don't think she's all that likely to get in to Marvel Tōkon Fighters. I think ice is like a really big deal in Arc System Works games. There's always like an ice character somewhere in every one of them. Jin, Mitsuru, Landrakia, Weiss, Arc System Works. I know Under Night is a French bread game, but you know what I mean. Arc System Works loves its ice characters, but we've already seen Star-Lord freeze in the trailer. I don't think that we need a character dedicated to freezing in every single like fighting game that they make. I just don't think that's necessary. Groot's cool. They could do any number of things with this man's kit. Like, I imagine Groot would have like a lot of moves that could like come out of the ground, and the different buttons could correlate to like different like portions of the map. Like the A version would be close to him, B more so mid, and C more so far away. They have a lot of potential to do a lot of stuff like that with Groot, with like stuff coming out of the ground to like low profile people from across the map. Potential for a very unique kit here, and the character has not been featured in a Marvel fighting game before. I think he's very likely. Once again, tail end of very like, maybe not. Maybe he's more so in here. Maybe, you know? Arc System Works could be very creative with the whole tree mechanic. We'll have to see. Maybe he could rank up here. Maybe I'll put him up there depending on like how the tier list looks at. I know the bottom half doesn't look as filled out. Trust me, all of these MBC3 characters are gonna make up the bottom half of the list. I guess I could go ahead and throw one of these up there. Taskmaster has been getting shafted by the MCU and just not been given any respect. I feel like a lot of these characters that are not in Marvel Rivals, nor were in the MCU much and are exclusive to me having knowledge of from Marvel vs. Capcom 3, are going to be more so towards the bottom half of the list, because not only are they not very iconic because they're not in the MCU, and only people who have been in like the fighting game scene like me would remember these characters existing, or maybe like hardcore Marvel fans who read the comics. They're just not iconic. To say nothing of the fact that despite that, they've all had fighting game representation already. So I think a lot of these Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom characters, you're gonna see more towards the bottom of the list. I think one big exception to that is Sentinel. Sentinel has sort of become iconic for the Marvel fighting game scene. Generally speaking, I feel like this character is a fan favorite, and I might be wrong about that, but just thinking about, this is one of the few characters who I know really has an identity in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Even though this isn't really a character in the Marvel universe, there's just like a bunch of Sentinels, you know? I think this character makes it higher than unlikely, and even has like a solid, decent chance because of the sort of identity that he's forged for himself throughout MVC history. We don't really know yet how much Arc System Works is going to try to distance themselves from Marvel vs. Capcom 3, but just looking at the trailer, there's a lot of mechanics that were similar, so maybe, who knows? The characters are gonna function very differently. We know that for sure. Dr. Doom looked nothing like he did in MVC3. They turned this man into Azrael. It's completely different person. Rodent Woman, I think, has the potential to be a joke character. Joke characters are a pretty big thing in like fighting games. Lots of games have joke characters, and I feel like Arc System Works isn't as big on them as a character like Capcom is with Dan and Street Fighter, but Rodent Woman has the potential to be a pretty funny joke character. We've all heard the joke, haha, she defeat Thanos with squirrels. It could happen. It could happen. Another character who has had a surge in popularity thanks to the ever-popular Marvel Rivals, I think she's very likely as a joke character. Now, Arc System Works is not known for doing this, so maybe she's more so along the lines of in here, but I still think, you know, give her the benefit of the doubt. Very likely. Ant-Man, I feel like, is been very underutilized. Most people haven't liked the last Ant-Man movie or two. I thought they were cool. Characters not in Marvel Rivals. Character has never been in a fighting game. I guess it would be kind of difficult to implement a kit like this into a fighting game where you have to keep hitboxes in mind. Like if he goes real small, how are you gonna hit him like that? I feel like it'd be a rather difficult set of powers to develop a fighting game kit around, but there's no doubt that it would be very diverse. There's no one else who would play like this character, guaranteed. I'm gonna put him in very likely. I want them to do something with him, and I feel like they want to do something with him, you know? It's just a matter of making it work, I guess, is the biggest roadblock. This character has the potential to be so sick. We'll just have to see. I think Blade is... I'm gonna put Blade in practically guaranteed for a few reasons. Blade hype is on the rise. He's practically guaranteed to be in Marvel Rivals next season, and he has that movie that's coming out, what is it, next year? Which is the year that this game's gonna come out. Blade hype is on the rise. I feel like he has a very high chance of getting into the game, and also, sword characters are a very, like, common thing to see in fighting games, and surprisingly enough, not that many Marvel characters use swords. You have Blade, Taskmaster, Psylocke, I guess Gamora has a sword here, but she's not been known for using a sword, at least to my knowledge. Maybe she is in the comics. So having a character they could use as a sword fighter, someone easy to pick up, easy to learn, could tie in with the movie, I think Blade has a very good chance of making it into the game. As does Venom. I think Venom is one of the most likely villains to make it into the game besides Thanos. I don't think Venom's been in a Marvel fighting game since Marvel vs. Capcom 2. And like the creative things that companies do with fighting game kits has diversified so much since then. And a character like Venom with the symbiotic powers and his like big frame, they could do a lot with him. He could be a very creative character to flesh out, and I'm gonna put him in practically guaranteed. This tier isn't really practically guaranteed, you know, this is more like 5-star likeliness. 5-star, 4-star, 3, 2, 1. I just sort of named them. But I think that Venom does have like 5-star likeliness to get in the game compared to some of these other characters. He's one of the more iconic villains. Villains are a lot more difficult to get iconic than heroes are, and I think that Ultron, Venom, Doom, Thanos, I guess you could put Galactus in there too, but he's not going to be in the game. I could even say that, like, I think Venom is more iconic than Ultron despite being an Avengers level threat, you know? Like, you compare that to a lot of these, like, Spider-Man villains, for example, and these characters, I feel like they used to be iconic. Back in the, like, early Spider-Man, like, movie era, the original Spider-Man trilogy, these characters used to be a lot more iconic than they are now. Times have sort of changed. I mean, everyone knows who Doc Ock is, right? Right? But even though him and Doc Ock were in, like, Spider-Man No Way Home, I still feel like these characters just aren't what they used to be in the public eye. Now, they haven't been in fighting games yet, which is a big plus, at least to my knowledge, unless I'm forgetting something. I'm pretty sure they haven't. I'm also not really sure where Spider-Man characters' rights are. I don't know if that's like as big of a deal as it used to be, because a few years back, giving like Spider-Man out to companies because he was owned by Sony was pretty difficult, and I don't know if that also tied in to the villains. I'm gonna rank Sandman down here in unlikely, and I'm gonna put Doc Ock a little higher because most people know who this man is in solid, decent chance. Even though he's not in the MCU, even though he's not in Marvel Rivals, most people know who Dr. Octopus is. Look, I mean, look at the man. He's iconic. I don't know where I got this art from. He's not this fat, I don't think, usually. But I'm gonna give him a decent chance. I'm gonna put him right there. Solid, decent. Adam Warlock, I don't think is gonna happen. I'm even gonna put this character as low as not gonna happen. Above Rocket. He's more so a side character from Guardians of the Galaxy, and Marvel Rivals went pretty ham on the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is why I think a character like Adam Warlock got into that game. I think there's a ton of characters who would fit into a fighting game better than Adam, so I'm actually gonna leave him here at 1-star likeliness. Cloak and Dagger would be so sick to see in a fighting game. You know what this character reminds me of? This character reminds me of what New 13 used to be like in Chrono Phantasma 1, where she could like switch phases and switch between the kit of New 13 and the kit of Lambda. Arc System Works games, unless I'm misremembering, don't have a character like Zelda and Sheik used to be like in Smash Bros. Brawl, where they just switch between two completely different kits. I think that that has so much potential. That would be so sick. This character is skyrocketed in popularity since Marvel Rivals came out, hasn't been represented in a fighting game yet. I really want them to make a fighting game character out of Cloak and Dagger. I really want her to be in Tōkon Fighters. I really do. Now, is she going to be? She's somewhere in these two tiers. I think just the potential here is something most people could see looking at what they could do with a kit like this in a fighting game. The thing is that I don't want to put her above other characters just for potential, you know, or just because I want her to be up there. Do I really think this character is more likely than someone like Ultron? Not really, but I put Groot above Ultron mainly because of Groot's potential to have a very unique kit. So maybe I should put her there as well. The top of solid decent chance. I really want to put her in very likely, but if I'm being realistic, I don't think it's all that likely. This would be a very big character to put like resources into, as this would basically be developing two characters in one. If they go that route. There's also the possibility that it's more so something like Dizzy, and like they both jump out at like different points, like for different attacks or something like that, which would be way more lame. And if they did that, I'd even bump her like down more. But this character has the potential to be the most unique and sickest kit on this list. Doctor Strange has really made a name for himself as an iconic Marvel character, and for good reason. Magic is such a fascinating concept. Only a couple characters on here, to my knowledge at least, just use straight up magic. And Doctor Strange is one of them. They don't have to stick to what this character was doing in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 at all. You could do anything with this character. This character can fly, there's all kinds of spells you could utilize. I think this character is practically guaranteed. Doctor Strange is so sick and so iconic, and in this day and age, so loved by the fan base. I think he's really, really likely to get into the game. There's like 60 characters on this list. If these tiers are even, then just the practically guaranteed tier will be about as big as I think the base roster is gonna be. Maybe I should rename this. Or maybe I should at least put like, let's do it this way. 5-star likeliness. There. That makes me feel a lot better about these placements. Practically guaranteed is not guaranteed. I can be wrong. I was wrong about BB Tag, although that was mostly because of the huge difference between how big I thought the roster was going to be and how big it actually was going to be. Although I still would never have guessed they would have had Platinum over Bang. But that's, well, we're not talking about that. Iron Fist. So the thing about Iron Fist is that I feel like it's a toss-up between him and Shang-Chi. This sort of martial arts just punch things style is always represented in some capacity in every fighting game, and I feel like one of these two has to make it in. And Shang-Chi has not been represented in a fighting game yet, and he had a movie. He's gonna have another movie. He's not in Rivals yet. Iron Fist is much more well known. He's been in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. He's been in Rivals. He's more iconic, you could say, as well. I'm not even sure most people knows that this is what Shang-Chi looks like in the comics. I sure as hell didn't before I googled his image. So the main question here is, do we think they're gonna stick with the more iconic Iron Fist, or will they branch out into Shang-Chi? I feel like they could go either way. I'm gonna put both of these characters in having a solid, decent chance with an asterisk here that one of them is going to shoot up into 4 or even 5-star likeliness, and once we see one of them, the other is gonna plummet down here or even here. So that's where I'm gonna leave them for now. Jeff is not happening. Nope. Nope. Nothing else to say about that. Nope. No thank you. No way. Loki, man, I'm just putting my foot in my mouth earlier by saying that villains aren't iconic, because Loki is a very iconic villain. Had potentially the best Marvel series on Disney Plus, and despite that, he's not been in a fighting game yet. I don't know what they could do with his kit, but they could be really creative. I don't think he's as likely as Venom, but there's a lot of untapped potential here. I'm gonna put him somewhere in very low. I'm gonna put him above Hela. Yeah, I think he's more likely than Hela for sure. See, the thing is that I don't really think of Loki much as a villain anymore. It's been a long time since he was causing terror on a true villainy level. Like, we've seen that, viewed that man more as like a hero or an anti-hero as of late. Maybe that's why I think that he's not really like, that Loki doesn't come to mind when I think of iconic villains. But he's an iconic character for sure. I'm gonna bump Hela down a little. Yeah, I think that putting her next to Loki, who is way more likely, is a crime. Bitch with sword, like I said, every fighting game has sword characters. And I think that Blade is much more likely to fill this role than Bitch with sword is. This would be a very simplistic kit to make. Call me crazy, I don't think they'd go for it. I think that they'd go for someone like Blade or even someone like Psylocke over Bitch with sword. Am I crazy for thinking that? Maybe. I had no idea who this character was before Marvel Rivals. I still don't really know who this character is. Never seen this character in the MCU. Never seen anyone talk about this character. Was never featured in a fighting game before, which I guess is a plus for her if we're going by the Arx's statement. But I really don't think she's very likely. I'm putting Bitch with sword at the top of unlikely. Magneto is pretty iconic. This character is infamous in the FGC for having those upwards quarter circles. Can't imagine them bringing those back. Famous villain, famous mutant character. Maybe I was just capping when I was talking about like the whole villains aren't as iconic as heroes in Marvel thing. Maybe I was just capping. Maybe that's just a lack of familiarity showing. He's likely. He's pretty darn likely. The most likely like mutant character to get into the game, besides Wolverine, if you ask me. The only thing really holding Magneto back from being higher is that he has already had a fighting game iteration, a few iterations in the Marvel vs. Capcom series. And I think that they may want to branch out a little with the villains, maybe explore Venom in a more modern sense, maybe explore Thanos. He was only an Infinite, but I still think he has a very solid chance of getting into the game, relatively speaking. Mantis, on the other hand, I do not. I think that a lot of these support characters that Marvel Rivals added to be like healers and whatnot don't really have much of an iconic fighting style in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, Mantis is a great character, but I don't think she'd be a great fit for a fighting game, if that makes sense. I'm gonna put her like down here. This is basically like Marvel Rivals support tier. Maybe above Rocket, but yeah, Mantis is not gonna be in this game. Like, I don't care if she wasn't in a fighting game before. She doesn't have much to work with in terms of a full kit to create a really unique and never before seen fighting game playstyle. If I'm wrong, come at me, I'll probably play her. Moon Knight has a lot of untapped potential. Never seen this man in a fighting game before. I'm repeating that a lot. I feel like it is one of the main big points to consider here. He had his Disney Plus short series. He's in Marvel Rivals. This character's cool. He's been making waves lately. Do I want to say he's practically guaranteed? Maybe. I do feel like he's really likely. This is also a character who's like not as iconic in the MCU. They could more so like lean into his like comic book appearance and whatnot. I know they're like basically redesigning all the characters. They designed their own appearances for like Iron Man and Captain America. So there's no indication that anyone will look like they did in the comics or in the MCU or anywhere before. Maybe my bias for how sick his kit would be is like leaking in a little, but I am gonna put him up here in 5-star likeliness. He'd be in 4-star if I didn't anyway. So he's up there regardless. I want to put him above Blade for the potential, you know? But yeah, I'll just leave him behind him. I'll just leave him there. Moon Knight, I wouldn't call him practically guaranteed. I do think he's really darn likely though, as far as most characters come, assuming we're starting with about 20 characters or so. Namor is a weird one. His sort of trident-like weapon would lead to a pretty unique playstyle that's not been explored yet, but he's not the most iconic villain, and I don't think a lot of people really like him either. I'm gonna put him here, 3-star, maybe above Sentinel. Yeah, that's about where I'll leave him. Let's rank some Marvel vs. Capcom characters, because these characters are all going to be pretty low for the most part, and I don't want to save them all for the end. Super Skrull, I don't know anything about this man. It looks like he has all the Fantastic Four's powers. That's pretty cool. But I think that a lot of these characters who've not been in the MCU, who've not been in Rivals, and were already in a fighting game in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 or Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, are all going to be more so down here because they've already had fighting game representation and they're not really iconic. So like a lot of characters like that, like Nova, are going to be going more so down here. I think Red Skull is another one of those. I kind of just threw this man on this list because I remembered that he existed, but that man sort of just guards the Soul Stone, right? I don't know if that's what he does in the comics after he gets turned into the Red Skull, but how much is there really unique here to make a kid of? I'm even going to drop this man down to like 1-star likeliness. Yeah, I'm going to put him like that low. Drax is another character who's just not gonna happen. This is a big, like, just a big, strong man in a game that has multiple other big, strong men who are much more likely to get in. Like Hulk's gonna get in. Captain America is just like a big, strong dude. The Thing is way more likely to get in than a character like him. War Machine would basically be an Iron Man clone. There's even less creativity to have here than with Ultron, and Iron Man's already in the game, so this is another character who just is not gonna happen. They could like go more heavy weapons than like focused on like the Iron Man tech, so I am gonna put him above Drax, but this is another character that's just not gonna happen. Shuma-Gorath as well. I think this character had like a brief appearance in the Doctor Strange movie, but that was about it. And also, if I'm not mistaken, I think someone even said that they like saw this man in the backgrounds of one of the maps in the trailer. He might just be a background character. MODOK is also very unlikely. I don't think he's like 1-star levels of very unlikely, but I think this man's gonna be at the bottom of 2-star potential. No one liked this man's appearance in the most recent Marvel movie, or not the most recent Marvel movie, his most recent Marvel movie appearance. No one is clamoring for MODOK to get into the game. He's not iconic, he looks silly. In a lot of ways, he's just a meme. Like, it's possible. I do think it's more possible than any of this characters, but not very likely, I don't think. Let's throw some of these UMVC 3 characters a bone here. Dormammu, I think, is significantly more likely, at least than someone like MODOK. This character had a very iconic scene in the MCU, and I don't think he'd be held back too much by the fact that both him and the confirmed character of Ghost Rider would both be using fire. I think this character ranks somewhere up here. He has a solid chance. Phoenix is probably the character who I know the least about on this entire list. I have no idea who this is. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that I'm sure someone would have pointed it out in the comments, I probably would have left her off the list altogether. I'm gonna give her the benefit of the doubt and put her next to Dormammu, but this one I have absolutely no idea about. Yo, what's Thor doing here? Thor's practically guaranteed, bro. I'm just throwing him up there. Like, why am I even leaving an iconic member of the original Avengers unranked yet? Thor's gonna be in the game. Can't wait to see what they do with him. There's no way he's not. Don't do it. Don't leave out OG Avengers, Arxis. I won't stand for it. Wolverine is the most iconic X-Man, and I think that he and Black Panther could potentially play very similar, and I think that there's no way that they're choosing Black Panther over the Wolverine. So I'm gonna put him up there, and on that note, I think that X-23 is way less likely. In fact, I'm not even sure how this character got into Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I think it's just a testament to how many characters that they were able to develop. This is another character that ranks somewhere down here, somewhere in the 2-star of likeliness. Now we're getting into characters that are a lot harder to rank. I'm not really sure what I think about a lot of these. Let's start with Mr. Fantastic, because the Fantastic Four movie is coming up. He's real popular. They were just added to Marvel Rivals. I think that the Fantastic Four in general are about to hit a popularity spike, and revealing them here soon with the movie about to come out and everything is very likely. Not had fighting game representation anywhere across the board, so we could just say these characters all have really good shots of making it in, and their rankings will probably be reflective of how unique and diverse their kits could be. And I think Mr. Fantastic's has the potential to be pretty up there. Something along the lines of Moon Knight. In fact, I should realistically put him above Moon Knight. I just think Moon Knight's kit would be sicker. The Thing has the slight drawback of him just punching things and maybe being a grappler, which is fine were it not for the fact that even with the Fantastic Four having a spike in popularity right now, there's no way he's beating the Hulk in that department. Now, I'm not saying they can't have two big characters. BB Tag had like Waldstein and Tager, of course. Guilty Gear has Potemkin and Gold Lewis Dickinson, so they could definitely do some unique things with him, but I think that because the Hulk exists, he isn't going to be up here and practically guaranteed when he might otherwise have been. I'm going to put him in very likely. I think it's very likely the Thing makes it into the game. He might have been in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, but other than that, I don't think any of the Fantastic Four have been in a Marvel fighting game. Like, unless it was MVC 2 specifically. Invisible Woman, like most Marvel Rivals supports, I think is way less likely, not just because she doesn't have like a super unique, or not unique, not a super like definitive fighting style to make a like fighting game kit out of, but also because turning invisible isn't really fun in fighting games. Like Arachne, I remember, had like one move that did it, and no one likes that character. I don't think he even used that move very much. Whatever. I do think she's more likely than a lot of these other characters, and I will put her here in the middle of unlikely. I do think that there is some possibility here, because Invisible Woman has a few powers. Like, she has like the Force and whatnot. She could basically mess with the opponent's positioning on the map. There's some potential here for them to do some cool fighting game things, but I don't think it's as likely as the other characters, such as the Human Torch. I don't know how this character would function in a fighting game. I don't know if it would be sort of like a mix of Ghost Rider and Iron Man. They'd probably do something unique with him. If they want iconic characters in the game, I feel like so far, with the exception of the Avengers, they're mainly picking one character from each main faction so far. We have Storm from the X-Men, we have Star-Lord from the Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't think they would choose to add multiple Fantastic Four to the game, and if they did, I still think that even with Hulk, Thing has a higher chance than Human Torch. But that might also not be by much. The Human Torch, there's a lot of things you can do with fire. Burn mechanics, fireball is like one of the most commonly used fighting game terms, and like making like an aerial based fireball kit is a potential possibility. I'm gonna leave him in very likely, but I'm gonna put him at the tail end of it. Maybe above Hela at least. Scarlet Witch, a lot of what I said about Doctor Strange applies here. This is a character that has jumped in popularity since the release of the MCU, and unlike Strange, she has no current fighting game representation despite that. I think this character might actually be a shoo-in. This character might be a lot more likely than most people think. I think that were it not for the Fantastic Four movie, she might be even more likely than Mr. Fantastic. But you already know they're gonna ride that hype train and add all the new characters that are popular and like the latest hits and whatnot. But I do think Scarlet Witch is definitely very likely to get into the game. Winter Soldier has always been a great pick for fighting games. I loved him in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and I love him in Marvel Rivals. Okay, I don't like fighting this man. I don't like him existing, but you know what I mean. He's cool. That's what matters. Cool in the MCU, cool in everything he's been in. I like Bucky Buchanan Barnes. I think everyone else likes him too. Yeah, he was just recently featured in the Thunderbolts movie as well. Bucky popularity, Bucky stocks are rising. Like, they would have to come up with something new to do with this kit, though. He does kind of just, like, shoot and whatnot, but he has that, like, bionic arm. You could do a lot of different things with the bionic arm in terms of a fighting game kit. Gonna throw him there and very likely. Emma Frost is also a very likely character. I don't know why this character is just absent from the MCU, but she has no fighting game representation, and you already know how Arxis loves making their gooner characters. How many waifus are in Marvel? Like, realistically. Like, yeah, some people like Black Widow, some people like Scarlet Witch. Nah, but this is one of those characters, and this is one of those characters. I bet you Arxis is gonna capitalize on this. Mark my words. Mark my words, bro. It's gonna happen. Trust. Deadpool is a fan favorite. Everyone loves Deadpool. People loved him in Ultimate Marvel. People loved him in the movies. People just love Deadpool. I think it's only a matter of time before he shows up in Marvel Rivals as well. Deadpool is just a fun character to have around. Just a lot of fun, unique crap he can do with a kit like Deadpool's as well. I don't think he's practically guaranteed. He did have, like, representation in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and whatnot. I'm gonna put him at the top of very likely. I don't think he practically dips into up here, but everyone loves Deadpool. Everyone would love to see Deadpool get into the game. I think it's very possible, probable even, that Deadpool makes it there. How many people are in Practically Guaranteed? We've got 8 characters in the default roster, and then what? 8 plus 5? 13? So counting the base roster, I'm basically have 23 characters up here. That might be a lot. I don't think any more of these characters are going to get into Practically Guaranteed. Gamora, for example, what even is this sword they gave her in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite? What were they trying to do to make Gamora playable in the fighting game, bro? Gamora stonks her down. She didn't make it into Marvel Rivals. She apparently already had a fighting game iteration. I don't know if this sword is from the comics or not, but she's dead in the movies and not really on everyone's minds right now. Fan popularity, I do think, is a factor to consider. I think that characters like Deadpool are a lot more likely because of fan popularity. I bumped Sentinel up probably a tier higher than I would have put him because he has such this iconic following that I believe he's developed in the MVC scene. And Gamora isn't really a character that is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds right now. I'm gonna put her about there. I don't think she's very likely. We already have Star-Lord from the Guardians of the Galaxy as well. I would be very surprised if they added Gamora into the game. Nebula, same diff. In fact, Nebula goes like right next to her. Everything I just said about Gamora applies to Nebula as well. Yes, she's a villain. She's not technically a Guardian of the Galaxy, at least from the MCU perspective, for the most of the MCU perspective. But I don't think she's very likely for a lot of the same reasons. Gambit, I think, is very interesting. I wasn't gonna put Gambit on this list at all. There's a few Marvel characters that I know that I didn't put on this list, like Beast is one who I know exists but did not put on this list, and that's because characters like that are a lot like Phoenix, where I know basically nothing about them, and I wouldn't have anything meaningful to contribute to a discussion here because it would basically be a shot in the dark from my perspective. Characters that weren't in fighting games, weren't in the MCU, weren't in Marvel Rivals. But Gambit has one very specific detail that I noticed as a BB Tag player. They gave someone in BB Tag a direct reference color to this man, and that signals to me that someone on the dev team likes this character. This might be a bit of a shot in the dark, but I'm making a hard read that the folks at Arxis like Gambit. I have literally nothing else to go off of. I mean, his picture's sick. Look at this man. Oh, it's fire. I'm putting him smack dab in the middle of having a decent chance. Just watch. If this call out is correct, I'm a god. Just saying. Just if Gambit gets in this game, I got the reads I need to succeed. I think these last 4 are all sort of the similar in the sense that they all sort of feel like they have decent chances, but there's nothing that stands out too much about them to make me think that they're very likely, or but they're also not obscure enough to be like put down here. Like She-Hulk, like what do you want me to say? It's She-Hulk. She punches things and whatnot, just like the Hulk. Maybe I'm putting her below Gambit. Gambit's getting in the game. Trust me. Captain Marvel, we already have Miss Marvel. Do we really need both? I know they're not like actually related in that sense. I don't know. This character was like the cover character for Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Her chances are fine. People know her. There's nothing really iconic to do with this character's kit though. There's nothing that really stands out. This almost feels like the Superman of Marvel, but just way less iconic, you know? She has so many powers. They kind of could do anything they wanted, I guess. I feel like this is another character that just goes smack dab in the middle of having like a solid, decent chance. I think Penny is actually slightly more unlikely, but they put 2 Parkers in the game. It's possible. I mean, she has a mech like Iron Man, but it functions very differently, at least from what I can understand. Okay, disclaimer, I don't know anything about this character from outside of Marvel Rivals. I didn't even know this character existed until I played Marvel Rivals, so I'm sort of shooting in the dark here, aside from the fact that would they put like 2 Spider characters in the game? Maybe. It's possible. It sounded to me like they want a lot more diversity throughout the kits, characters that are iconic throughout a much more diverse, widespread, overarching bubble across different like MCU franchises and factions. I think this looks like a very solid beginning roster of like the confirmed characters plus the 5-star likeliness like as here, and maybe some of these 4-star characters as well, like Deadpool or like Bucky or someone like that. When I think about how this already looks like about the size of a base roster, I can't imagine them really swapping out many of these characters for someone like Penny Parker. I'm even gonna bump her down. I really don't think Penny is very likely. Like, I think this is a 2-star likeliness character, which leaves us with Psylocke. I think Psylocke is very cool. The whole ninja thing, her abilities are super unique, her like mind powers, her like psychic shuriken. There's a lot you could do here. I think there's a lot of potential here, and like, she's not been represented in a fighting game. She uses a sword, not many sword characters on the list. I think this character is pretty darn likely, all things considered. Like, I may even bump her up to like the top half of the list. Not the top half, but somewhere like above these characters. I might even dip her up in here into very likely. Her kit would be so cool. She hasn't been represented yet in a fighting game. Take a drink for how many times I've said that this video. But anyway, we're gonna put her somewhere up here. More than Squirrel Girl? I think the Squirrel Girl joke character thing is slightly more likely to happen. I think I'm content with that. I do think she's actually pretty likely. It would be sick to have her in the game. See, like, a lot of these characters up here, there's a lot of diversity in how they would fight, you know? If a character would fight like someone up here, but they're not as iconic or something like that, I don't think they have as high chances of making it in. That's my list of predictions from Marvel Tōkon Fighters as it stands right now. We'll have to see how big the roster is. I think that a size of about this, maybe 20 to 25 characters at launch, is very likely. This is about what I'm expecting the roster to look like. And once again, maybe sprinkle in Deadpool, Punisher, Loki, Bucky, like the Thing, maybe some of these characters. I know these characters have like a real decent chance, but I'd be real surprised if anyone from this tier made it in, except from like one of these two Fist characters and like Gambit, because Gambit's just a hard read. I have no real evidence for that, you know? Anyone below that, I would be very surprised. So that's my list. Hopefully I didn't offend you you Marvel nerds too much for my lack of comic knowledge. Like I said, this was just for fun. Reminded me of the old days back when I used to do this for VV Tag, predicting who was gonna get into the game. It was just a lot of fun in general. Maybe I'll learn a little more about like the Marvel Comics world when we see some character reveals, and maybe who will get into the game and whatnot will change based on who I see get revealed. Maybe I'll think that some characters are more or less likely based on reveals we get down the future. Maybe even 2 days from now. It's real exciting. Like this character, Miss Marvel, this character would have been like down here. Like, so I know they're gonna schmix me at some point. I know something here is gonna be wrong, but that's okay. Not expecting this to be 100% accurate, not expecting this to be 50% accurate, but we'll see. That's my assumptions. Looking forward to seeing how things pan out. But till then, this is Razzle48 saying goodbye, and I'll see you next time. Just please reveal some Blaze Blue at the stream when you're announcing some of these characters. Please! I need BB Tag 2!